do some of this empathetic listening before students too escalated. So this is a time to step in now and do some of this. So thank you, Carolyn, for bringing us to that student piece. And again, that it's not saying that his behavior is okay or right, it's just naming the feeling or naming the emotion and validating it.
And I think sometimes there's a misinterpretation. Just because I know I go into the classroom, I'm not saying the child's right. I'm just acknowledging, what they are feeling.
Yep.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I think that's where we get to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, where sometimes it seems like the teacher's being defensive. Like they're looking at it as you not helping, because it's not always, and that's really sometimes you're just making sure you're not escalating.
Yep.
And trying to find out what the matter is. And I think sometimes there are teachers who think that that's you going against them, and it's not.
And it's not. It's just that that's when they're agitated is not the moment to reason with them either.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus, I
It's
think
not like
people
black
have to
and white,
understand
right
what
versus wrong.
Carolyn's
That's
job
some
is.
people are like either I'm right or I'm wrong. Like they don't
But it
see
isn't
like
right or
that.
wrong.
I know, but
Yeah.
I'm saying
That's
they
how
just
it
don't
is.
see that.
But that's
middle.
that things that we have to think about what we need for professional learning for our
So I was
staff,
just gonna say,
so that they understand these techniques and they can utilize these techniques also.
Yeah.
And so that they understand what she's doing when she's coming into the classroom and or what they can be doing with their students also. But that's an important piece because
and the
they
other
don't
very
know.
important piece that I've kind of been stressing to the staff too is having that follow-up conversation, because there isn't time in the middle of a class when one of us is coming in to help and intervene to sort of really do the debrief with the teacher. It's critical for the teacher to come find whoever that person was.
They'd rather
and then
complain
talk
to
them.
another colleague.
And often it's that instead.
And then you heard
Yep.
that this didn't happen.
Because they're making assumptions, and
So-
I've been really trying to push that, where people please talk to the person so that you can find out what happened. And then if you need to complain later, that's different.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, people kind of like settle in what they're unhappy about and have never talked to the person. And
So-
often I'll say, did you talk to someone?
we're gonna go to that debrief piece because that's a really important piece of this de-escalation and escalation and de-escalation, that there needs to be some type of recovery phase.
Right, it's the hardest
And
thing in
recovery for
school.
everybody,
Right.
because there's multiple folks who have been involved, and the teacher needs to feel validated too. So in a session that I did, a classroom teacher was saying, in the moment, so I called, the social worker came, took the student, I have to immediately go back to instructing my class. That the teacher in that moment doesn't even have a time to
There's
stop
no
and
time out.
reflect
Right.
and process
Correct.
and think about what just happened and how did maybe I escalate it. There's not time to do that in the moment.
Right.
So ensuring that there is time afterwards at some point to debrief, have a conversation, think about next time, what can we all do differently? Because I think we do this a little bit more intentionally with students than we do with the adults who are involved. So we're going to get there at the
Yeah,
end
'cause
of
that's
this
the need,
phase.
because it goes along a little bit to, just not having time as a teacher, and even in your story about your son who had lunch with the teacher. Like, those kinds of things are all sort of connected, and in a school, it's very
And
difficult.
I think too, and I'm just, I was, Jamie I think was talking when I said, people really need to know what Carolyn's job is. Our job is, she's not, right, she, is trying to de-escalate problems in the school, but in everybody's defense too, and that's what I'm thinking, not this year, next year, this is Carolyn Keller, she's our social, whatever,
This
because
is what she's supposed to do.
this is what she's supposed to do.
Yep.
And there's been so much transition in this past year, I'm hoping that the whole support staff this year, next year.
So make a
I agree
star.
with you.
Honestly.
Well, one of the things too, and I think it's more than next year, I think it's something we still could be addressing this year for sure. Because I think there are those people who understand that's Carolyn's role, but then it becomes they think they don't want Carolyn, like you had said last time, they want it to be John and me, because they don't want that, they just want the consequence.
Yeah.
But which has to be explained now, again, not later, which is Carolyn is first, possibly. Carolyn will let us know if that student needs a consequence, and then we kind of follow up with that. Or the teacher still has to come to, because John and I are the only ones that can give like a suspension or an out of school, if it deserved that.
Right.
Because the consequence can come from the teacher, it doesn't need to be.
So we've mentioned a couple items that should be noted, and I think some of them are already noted on your action plan. Looking at kind of staff buy-in and staff PD around this area is understanding their classroom-based role. So what is my classroom management strategies? What are my classroom reinforcement? What is my classroom consequence system? What are the roles, and what is the process for requesting additional assistance? So is it the ODR? Is it the walkie-talkie? Having a clear process and procedure around that. And then having clarity of roles and functions, because it's important for staff to know that this is Carolyn's role and responsibility, and here's what she's supposed to do when she comes to my classroom. Here's John and Amy's role. And then also I'm hearing a little bit of a mind shift change that I'm putting your staff back on your triangle, because remember, it's not just for students. Thinking about there's probably a small portion of your staff who needs some mind shift changing around that it's not about consequence.
Right.
It's not about the punishment. It's
Right.
not about the suspension.
Right.
But looking at the other pieces that go into it and the
Yep.
importance of the teaching the expectation and reinforcing that expectation before we get there.
Right.
So thinking about what supports are we going to build in for those staff. So I think that was important to note and think about when we go to action planning this afternoon. Acceleration. Sometimes this is when behavior can become a little bit more focused and directed. Typically it's around those that they feel safe to now focus their attention on. So sometimes it's an adult in the classroom, sometimes it's a certain peer that a kiddo typically has interactions with. It might look like questioning or arguing, it's non-compliance, whining, avoidance. This is when adults tend to feel targeted by behavior. So we talked about, and I heard it when we went through some of those examples, that you might feel really frustrated. I think it was John's behavior of pushing and teasing a kid in the hallway. We have our own emotions that go into this. So being mindful about our own behavior and our own emotions and being able to check those. Because if I'm feeling personally attacked by the behavior of a student, I'm going to change my response because now I'm feeling attacked. So being able to reflect on that and saying, take me out of it, how am I going to productively respond to the student? And not take it personally, because when we go into it feeling personal,
I think that's a huge right there. What you said. Yep. Taking it personally, like they think it's all everybody's. The kids are against them, and then they think the administration's against them. Carol, the support staff. And then I'm looking at them like, maybe you are nuts. You know, they're 8 and 9-year-old kids, and you're like thinking it's like.
But let's all be mindful that we've had our own experiences and our own journeys that have taken us to a place. So it might be my own experiences made me feel targeted by behavior, made me feel non-supported and non-understood. So we can't just dismiss it, but then how do we provide supports for that person? So if I am one who feels personally attacked by that, is there somebody who can say, hey, I know you're feeling really frustrated with these students. What can I do to help you out in this classroom? So I'm looking at Carolyn for that, because I think of the social worker as that kind of coaching role of being able to provide some adult support, but being mindful of that. And sometimes even just showing people that you sometimes have to hold up the mirror and say, wow, I'm reacting because I'm feeling personally attacked. Because some folks don't even realize their own adult interaction and how it
You just hear the
partakes.
conversation of it, and I'm like, kind of look at them like.
A lot of, people it's not natural for them to self-reflect, and it's a very important skill that teachers need to be doing all the time.
Right.
Some people do it very
You're not a
naturally,
lesson.
other people do not. And it becomes part of that confidence issue, and again, it's not about that they did something wrong, it's because there's always learning. Every day we could learn something new. It doesn't matter how many years experience we have, and getting a teacher to sort of self-reflect and realize that it's not something that's wrong with them, and because I think those people who are unwilling to sort of really dig deep, they pretend it's another issue. It's never that, it's not their fault, it's something else, and so those people aren't able to improve because they can't get out of that.
So I'm thinking back to another one of our action step items when we talked about a system for acknowledging staff. If we notice that our staff are able to kind of reflect, are they being acknowledged for, hey, I know it's really hard in your classroom, and you took the moment and said, you know what, I don't actually do a great job providing directions to him before the math test. That's not what you said. I'm just pretending.
Sure.
So I'm going to reinforce, you know what, good job reflecting, so how can we make it easier for you? So acknowledging staff behavior is going to be really important. Building our own community of trust and support is going to be really important for this implementation phase. So looking at how are we doing that. Bringing us back to our example from Jason and his teacher. When he says, when his behavior escalated and went to the swearing, the FU, very provocative, very threatening. So the teacher responded by moving closer to him and putting her hand on his shoulder. Not how we would respond.
That would make me mad.
So looking at how do we respond? We want to looking at safety. So we need to ensure that everybody is safe in the classroom. As soon as behavior starts accelerating, this is where prevention techniques, things like that are probably not going to work. We're still going to stick with them. So we still want to set up a successful environment. But we need to now be focusing on the safety of ourselves, others, and that student. So sometimes this is when removing an audience can come into play. Sometimes this is stepping away and just allowing the student to have space. So when the student said F you, if maybe the teacher just left that situation and didn't go back and forth with him, it would have de-escalated, maybe not. But oftentimes, escalation is going to run its course at this phase, so we want to ensure safety of ourselves and others. So again, maybe removing audience, maybe we're kind of giving our own space, ensuring the student is safe in their space, removing any kind of, the student tends to, this is where you got to know your kiddos, if they tend to be like a thrower or destruction of property, ensuring that they're moved from that space that can, here goes that walkie-talkie across the room. If they're a runner, ensuring that maybe there's space or somebody's clued into they're going to be leaving the room. This is where you need to have a process and a procedure for all of those things. So here's that intervention, again, removing all those kind of triggering pieces that could be around them, following your crisis prevention procedures. I'm not sure, kind of official procedures.
No, we don't have official. We have like procedures at the office level, like so the secretaries know what to do and the order to call.
Yep.
But it is, I would say that only the teachers that have students that need it are aware of it.
Yep.
I wouldn't say the whole school is aware of it.
So that's something we're going to be talking about when we come back for our last day of training, setting up kind of for Tier 2 and Tier 3. A crisis plan and a prevention procedure is going to be really important and something that should be universally known, because you never know when a crisis might happen in my classroom, and it's never happened before.
Right. We have like the crisis plan, like the district type, like,
yes. If an intruder comes into your building. Yep.
But this part, what you're talking about, the specifics of.
I'm talking about a protocol in place for when a situation, a crisis situation happens with a student, a heavy hitter or a high escalation.
Our heavy hitters, so the teachers who are involved in those kids know it.
Yep.
But it is not throughout the school.
So this is to take note kind of for future action planning, looking in for that protocol of how do we handle escalations in the classroom. And we talked about this last time, the protocol of using the walkie-talkies. I think that should be something staff universally know.
Yes.
This is how I call, here's what happens when I call, this is what I expect when I call. So there's clarity for all folks involved. Really important to do that. So you've done all of those things, the student is still reaching their peak. So in the Jason example, the teacher put her hand on him and now he's up, threatening, ready to punch, ready to go. Peak behavior. Looking at, usually tends to be physical aggression, destruction, maybe self-injury, maybe actually withdrawing, running. Could be some physical things like hyperventilating. What type of peak behaviors are you seeing with your kind of heavy hitters? Property destruction?
Or
Fighting, physical aggression, and property destruction, your biggest? How are you currently responding to those? So when a student is actively destroying the room, what is your response looking like?
The teacher calls the office